I'm an escort, and I do a lot of my work through sugar websites. I essentially do pay-per-date sugar as a lot of my job. You give me some money, and you act like my sugar daddy for a date, basically. When I first started sex work, I was contacted by a guy who called himself John from Craigslist. Very creative name for a client to come up with, I know. John wanted to meet me in public first, which is a very normal request. Actually, with sugar, I only agree to meet in public first anyway. Usually at a restaurant or something, to talk before deciding if we want to commit to something more sweet. I agreed. He then asked me to wear a specific outfit. The outfit that he wanted was kind of an odd one, although it's not uncommon for sex workers to be asked to wear a specific look with sugar dates. I usually agree if I can, unless they want me to have an expensive outfit, in which case they need to pay for it themselves, or if they're asking me to do something that is not appropriate for the occasion, like wear a little black dress to Starbucks, or if they're asking me to wear something that would just not be flattering on me. He said he wanted me to be comfortable, and a lot of sugar daddies do say that. He wanted me to wear yoga pants, running shoes, a sports bra, and a hoodie. I can definitely imagine a very cute version of an outfit like that, but I don't have one. I have baggy men's sweatpants with holes in them, a sports bra that is not flattering at all, running shoes that are covered in dirt, and a baggy men's sweater that doesn't zip up in the front. I told him as much. I said that he could get me a gift card to a cute girly yoga wear place, or I could pick something casual and attractive to wear. He said no, and also said that I could wear anything resembling his request. Literally any sports clothes. It didn't have to look cute at all. I was not enthusiastic, but I didn't realize at the time that you cannot accept these requests because the client will end up thinking you're ugly and won't want you back. So, I said okay. He then suggested that we meet on the wharf. I said that's fine and suggested a reasonable time to meet. He said no, we can't meet there. Not at that time. Somebody will see me, and I don't want anyone to recognize me. He wanted to meet me at midnight instead. This is a common concern for dates, and I would be willing to go to another city, but not meet at off hours. I have to think of my safety too. That's the whole point of meeting in public. I suggested we go to a city an hour south. He said okay, and picked the pier, and then again suggested we meet at 1 in the morning. No. I said I would not meet in the middle of the night, and suggested we meet around noon or 6 p.m. or something else reasonable. The restaurants and all the businesses would otherwise be closed, and it was going to rain. He said he liked meeting in the rain, that the rain was magical. Again, he insisted that he just couldn't meet during the day, or otherwise someone would see him. He said that if it was the pier and wharf that were bothering me, he was willing to meet me at the beach. In fact, he could even meet me at the beach tomorrow, at midnight. After a minute, I said, "Oh, maybe, let me think about it." I waited about an hour and then messaged him back saying, "Oh, John, I just think I'm not cut out to be a sugar baby. I'm just not ready for something like this." Then I changed his name in my phone to John Watery Grave and blocked his number. I purposely let him down easy in case he was going to stalk me or get angry or something. Also, it was good not to give away any red flags that I was picking up on, so he couldn't alter his behavior and prey more easily on other sex workers. I reported him to bad date sites where sex workers could compare notes, but I didn't call the cops because, hell, I'm an escort. Why would I do something like that? He emailed me later during the next stretch of rainy weather that we had and asked if I would be okay with meeting at 3 a.m. on the beach. Or if not, 3 a.m. on the wharf. Or if not, 4 a.m. on the pier south of us. And if none of those, did I have a friend with a similar build as me who would be willing to do it? It was just so weird. Years later, I still think it's surreal that I met someone who is in all likelihood a serial killer, or at least someone wanting to be one. He insisted that he had to leave his house at midnight or right before 3 a.m., had to meet a woman wearing running clothes at a place right near the water on a rainy night, and there was just so much about it that felt so wrong. He even told me that he was looking for someone with my specific frame and only from Craigslist. Watery grave guy? I hope we don't meet again.
I recently went on a hike with my friend and his mini schnauzer at our local state park. We had gone on the trail several times before. It's very popular with hikers and families. It was late evening and getting dark, so we picked up the pace. Once it was dark enough to not be able to see where we were stepping, I turned on a little flashlight that my mom had given me just that day. She had said she was worried about me walking to my car after my late night classes and told me to shine it in someone's face if there was anyone creepy, which I thought was silly. Bringing this flashlight was a total fluke, but I was happy to have it for the increasingly dark hike. We were about 10 minutes walk from the edge of the forest where we parked, when we encountered a lone adult male walking in the same direction as us, about 100 yards ahead. He was Caucasian, in his mid-50s, wearing non-hiking clothes. He was walking slowly, which was odd because it was very dark and most hikers on the trail were long gone, and if not, they'd be hurrying out of the woods. The man didn't have a flashlight in the very dark forest. My finger slipped from the flashlight and it turned off for a second. I turned it back on, and the man had stopped walking and was standing in the path ahead of us. He quickly moved to the side as soon as I turned the light back on and said something on his cell phone while we continued forward toward him. As we walked by the man standing on the side of the path, our normally friendly dog barked and growled at the man. The only words we heard the man say were, "Ah, she's an ankle biter." He was suddenly not talking on his phone. I shined the flashlight in his direction while we walked by to know where he was, in the extremely dark woods. I had a really weird feeling about him and started jogging away with my friend. We ended up in a full run out of the woods. As we were getting back in the car, we saw the man exit the woods maybe a minute after us and walk quickly toward us getting in our car. He had to have been running because we ran the whole way out of the woods. We're in our mid-20s, and this guy was significantly older, so it would have required effort to run that far that fast for him. When we got in the car, with the man still quickly approaching, I told my friend to floor it, and we got out of there. The creepy woods guy? Let's not meet.
This happened a few years ago at about 2 o'clock in the morning. I had been out clubbing and was a bit drunk, so I was not as alert as usual. While waiting for the bus, a man sat down next to me. He was big and burly, in his early 20s, with blonde hair and puke on his shirt. Something about him immediately unsettled me. It was as if I knew he had sat down not because of the bus, but because of me, which felt like an absurd thought. We were surrounded by people on their way home, after all. The bus finally arrived, and I thought I was rid of the guy. But I wasn't that lucky. He decided on the seat across from mine, and I noticed he was watching me. He wasn't even trying to hide it, just blatantly staring at me. Oh well, I thought. Maybe he was just spacing out or something. After a while, I briefly glanced in his direction. It was purely for the sake of my own curiosity. I shouldn't have done this, as it only seemed to encourage him. He asked me what the time was, but made no further attempt at engaging me in conversation, as my reply was rather curt. The bus stopped, and the man appeared to get off. I was glad, as we weren't that far away from my own stop. Then I heard someone call out to me. It took me a while to realize that it was me they were talking to, as they just shouted, "Hey you," and I had no choice but to look up. The man had not gotten off, but was standing in the doorway of the bus looking at me. "Are you getting off?" he demanded to know. I just stared at him. He repeated the question several more times before re-entering the bus and sitting down across from me again. This time, however, he put his feet up on the seat next to me, so I was caged in between him and the window. The bus stopped once more. I didn't make a move, even though the man got off. It wasn't my stop, after all. Then, the bus driver announced that everyone had to get off, as this was the last stop. They must have changed the route since it was after midnight. I stood up and looked behind me. The bus was completely empty. Everyone must have already gotten off at the former stop. We were outside the city, surrounded by nothing but trees and mountains. I got off and waited right outside the bus, weighing my options. I could see the stranger in the corner of my eye. He was some meters away, turned halfway away from me, but I knew he was keeping tabs on me. The bus driver looked at me and signaled that I should come closer. "Do you know this man?" he asked. I shook my head no. He considered this for a moment, then told me to hurry back onto the bus. No sooner had the doors closed behind me when the stranger threw himself at them, screaming to be let in, slamming his fists against the doors violently. He sounded completely enraged, and the doors shook as he beat on them. It was terrifying to imagine what he might have done if I had been alone with him. I sobered up instantly. The bus driver drove me home, and I thanked him profusely, crying while doing it, which was kind of embarrassing. It was incredibly stupid of me to have let it go so far, and who knows what might have happened if it were not for that bus driver. I believe that the second stop might not have been part of his route, but that he decided to continue when he saw the drunkard nearly try to get me off the bus. The whole ordeal was just so strange, as I live in an incredibly safe country and had never really been conscious of stranger danger until then. Creepy stranger, let's not meet again.
This happened about 5 years ago, so please be patient with me as I may not remember every detail or moment exactly correct. That being said, this whole experience is burned pretty intensely into my mind, so I remember about 90% of it pretty well. I'm a 26-year-old man, making me about 21 when the event occurred. I live in southern Ohio, about 45 minutes away from Cincinnati. I went to a smaller college in the area, and I was pretty isolated from most of my friends and family during the week. My friends all went to their various choices of college throughout the Midwest, and my family remained in my hometown. I ended up at school alone because I had a rather specific major, and this was one of the few colleges in the country that would accommodate me. Luckily, my girlfriend went to college fairly close to me, so I would often find myself making 2 to 3 trips a week to see her and study with her. On most weekends, I would go on road trips to visit my friends, considering their campuses were a lot bigger and more fun than my small town college. During this particular weekend in question, I was getting ready to make about the 2-hour trip to see my friend Kyle at his school, the name of which I probably shouldn't disclose. I had made this same trip about 30 times, so I knew the route pretty well, and didn't even need to use a GPS to get there. I left on Friday afternoon once I was done with classes for the day, and I was set to arrive at Kyle's dorm at about 8 o'clock, right on time to go out for a night and binge, drink, and eat garbage food. Oh, the joys of college. I set off at about 5:50 and was roughly 15 minutes into my trip when my girlfriend called me. This was pretty unusual considering I had already told her I was driving to Kyle's, so I answered quickly thinking something must have been wrong. She was working that night, and her car had broken down in her dorm room parking lot when she was leaving to go to her shift. She figured I wasn't too far into my trip and wanted to know if I could give her a quick ride to work before I'd got too far away. Me, being the dutiful boyfriend I was, agreed to come get her since I was only about 20 minutes from her location. I was already pretty far off campus, so I pulled over my car on the highway and used GPS to see if there was a faster route to her from where I was. The map on my phone revealed that there was an exit coming up that would take me to a side street that I could use to get to her fairly quickly, so I texted her that I was on my way and set off toward my new destination. I had seen the exit in question plenty of times, but I never had any reason to get off on it. So once I exited the highway, my surroundings were completely unfamiliar to me. The exit took me off onto a road that had dense woods on the right side and the highway on the left side. My phone informed me that my next turn wasn't for about 5 miles, so I had a ways to go until I had to do any navigating. About a half mile later, the road had turned, and there were now trees on either side of me, and to be honest, it was a really beautiful sight. It was October, so the surrounding woods were a mixture of various warm colors, and I was actually really enjoying my little detour. The entire area was wooded on either side, with only the occasional break in tree line for a driveway and a mailbox to poke out. The houses were hard to see through the trees, but from the few glimpses I did manage to get, the houses were actually pretty nice. It was getting a little dark, and I had about a mile to go before I had to turn when I noticed a Toyota with the hood popped open further down the road. As I approached, I noticed a man in a shirt and a tie with his head under the hood, seemingly with a broke-down car. There was no traffic to be seen behind me, so I stopped for a moment to ask him if everything was okay and if he needed to borrow my phone or anything. He didn't seem to hear me at first, so a little louder this time I said, "Everything okay?" This time he seemed to have heard me and he lifted his head up, away from the engine, and looked at me. He seemed like a completely normal guy, and he had a normal face to match. The best way I could describe him is just pedestrian looking. He had short brown hair, brown eyes, and 5 o'clock shadow. He smiled at me and said he was on his way home from work and that something had gone wrong with the engine. I offered him my phone in case he wanted to call anyone or get picked up or get the car towed. He replied, "Oh no, that's okay. I have a car service that will come get my car for me. They're closed until tomorrow morning though, so I hate to ask, but could you possibly give me a ride to my brother's house? He lives only like 4 minutes away from here." This absolutely should have been a red flag for me. I think I was a little stunned by how normal this guy seemed, considering most hitchhikers on TV are crazy or axe murderers. why couldn't he have used my phone to call his brother? Why couldn't he have called his brother? I guess I wasn't thinking clearly at the time, but hindsight is 20/20, and I'm well aware I made a bad decision that night. I was physically much bigger than him, and he was driving a nice car, so I figured he wasn't a weirdo or local crazy person, and I could overpower him if I needed to. So I agreed to give him a quick ride to his brother's house since it was on the way to my girlfriend's, who would later be livid with me for taking so much time to get her to work, but that's a story for a different time. I unlocked the door for him so he could get in, and he pointed me in the direction of his brother's house, and we set off on our way. Things were pretty normal for a few minutes, and I was starting to feel like maybe I did the right thing. Then things started to get weird. The first thing that made me uncomfortable was the way he acted every time there was a swear word in the music I was listening to. He was almost flinching every time 50 Cent said fuck or bitch, and I picked up on it pretty quickly, so I changed the song thinking that he was just really against swearing or something. About a minute after I changed the song, there was no swearing in this one, he reached up and slammed his hand on the radio's power button and turned it off. It wasn't crazy hard or anything, but it was definitely enough to get me to notice. I tried to make light of the situation and said, "Not your style?" This question was met with complete silence. At this point, I was ready for this guy to get out of my car, so I asked, "How much further do we have to go? I have to be somewhere soon and I can't be late." He said we had about 4 minutes to go, which immediately sent up warning signs in my head, considering he had told me the same thing about 8 minutes ago. I decided that was enough. I didn't think he was dangerous or anything, but I figured our destination was further than he was letting on, and he was lying so that I would take him despite the distance. It was getting late, and I wasn't trying to face my girlfriend's wrath, so I told him this was as far as I could go, and he'd have to walk the rest of the way. His mood changed immediately, but instead of getting angry, which I was completely expecting, he became panicky and was practically begging me to take him the rest of the way. His overreaction set off pretty much every alarm I had in my head, so I told him to remove himself from my car before I had to remove him myself. It was then he pulled out his rather oversized wallet and offered to pay me to take him the rest of the way. He tried to pull out a stack of $20 bills, but as he removed them from his wallet, something else fell out of it onto the car seat next to him. It was only a split second before he grabbed it and shoved it back in his pocket, but I got a good enough look at it for it to haunt me to this day. Along with his money, a small Ziploc bag full of what I'm confident were adult teeth fell out of his wallet. Front teeth, molars, you name it. Everyone I've told the story to has been skeptical of this part, but I'm confident that's what I saw. I freaked out worse than I ever have and screamed at him to get out of my car, and he got out immediately and was looking at me with surprised eyes on the side of the road. I took off and called the police, who simply told me to not pick up hitchhikers ever again, and that they couldn't do anything since the man didn't commit any crimes. I don't know where he was going or what he was doing, and I'm pretty sure I don't want to know. I do know, however, that he seemed to have all of his teeth still in his mouth. I don't know whose teeth those were or why he had them, but creepy teeth hitchhiker, let's never meet again.